All right, one more thing here on Locked On Heat. It's presented by Open Phone. Keith Smith from Spotrac wrote a piece outlining Miami's offseason and came up with projections for Davion Mitchell's next contract and Nikola Jovic's next contract. Let's start with Nico. Um, Keith Smith wrote, if Miami could get him on a team-friendly extension, something around $40 million over 4 years, they'd probably do it in a flash. For Jovic, that would be tempting money to lock in for. He could also bet on himself and play things out to restricted free agency in 2026. If Miami has to go up to the MLE equivalent deal, that's as far as they should go to re-sign Jovic now. A sneaky contract extension that's available for Nico and for the Miami Heat, right? We're talking about Tyler Hero. We talked about it on today's full episode. But Jovic also eligible for a contract extension going into the final year of his rookie scale contract. This tends to be the time when teams lock up guys that they feel good about, that they drafted. How do you feel about $10 million a year for Nico?
I think it's a great deal. I don't think he's quite lived up to that amount. And I also don't think that he's lived up to more than that. And I think you're still banking on the potential being realized. He just, whether it's because the team was set up with a different goal than being able to incorporate them and develop him and be able to use them more fully, I think, or whether it was injury or just development isn't linear. And that being the case, I think you've seen enough from him over the last few seasons where you could say, yeah, he's going to reach that point where he is a $10 million a year player. And that's not a bad deal for a guy, given his skill set and everything else he can do out in the court. And I think he's shown the ability to grow, to morph into a different version of the player that he once was. He's put in the work. We know how he's embraced it. And he's been a great fit for Miami, I think, in terms of, again, of having that potential there. They haven't been able to maximize what he does. I know that last year could be looked at as a step back because he was given the starting opportunity and then lost it. But I think there was so much about that team that was just off to such a clunky for Nico the way that it could have. But when he finally did get back into form, he was sensational. He provided a real spark off the bench. And even if that's ultimately what his role is here in Miami, it's still a role that you pay $10 million a year for. And I think that's a good deal.
$10 million for a high-end bench rotation guy. That's about right. That feels good to me. That's what Sam Hauser makes basically for Boston, right? And if it's slightly less than what Naz Reid makes for Minnesota, and Reid won Sixth Man of the Year last year. So that's sort of what we're talking about. I think $10 million a year is more than fair. Yeah, you're right. You could look at last year as a step back, considering that they projected him as a starter. He ultimately failed at that. He wasn't a starter. I don't think he's a starter. They need to kind of stop trying to make him a starter, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I think he's super valuable as a change of pace, juice your offense bench guy. And more than anything than his role fluctuating or whatever you think of that, he has shown real development over the first 3 years of his career. And that's what you're paying for, is really he got better from year one to year two, where he was unplayable in year one to playable in year two. He was playing real minutes in playoff games 2 years in a row for us. Now, you probably don't feel great about that, but he still did it. And if you're projecting forward and whether or not he can outplay the value of that contract, based on his development in 3 years, I would say for sure, yes. Like by the end of next year, he should be better than a $10 million a year player. And certainly in 2 or 3 years, which is why if you're Nico, you might just say, I'd rather just bet on myself for another year and enter restricted free agency and make you have to match something for me in another year. So I don't know that this is definitely, and Keith Smith is not reporting that this is a for sure. I think Nikola Jovic also has a tough decision in, hey, do I just want to lock in for another guaranteed contract, or do I want to bet on myself and enter restricted free agency next summer? I could see him going either way with that, but it'll be interesting to see if Miami even offers him that extension. My feel is that they obviously have to figure out, first of all, is Nico on the team or is he traded in some big trade?
Sure.
And if he is on the team, what does it look like and all these things? They got to figure out all these other things first. But if we get to right before the year and you got to start thinking about extensions, and if Nikola Jovic has a place long term in Miami, I think they would at least have the conversation with him in his representation for sure.
2 points on that. I think one, I'd also feel much more comfortable if they were just a little bit lower. I mean, maybe I don't think it's nickel and diming him, but I would feel better even if there was 4 for 36 rather than 4 for 40. Maybe it's just me and that $10 million a year. It's the kind of that would be a much more easy to handle deal for the Miami Heat, especially if they're going to consider moving him. That's a nice, much more movable contract, even at just $1 million per year less. And I don't know that I don't think he's done enough either to say that he's going to earn a bigger contract around the league. That's my next point, is that I think if he, I don't think it would behoove him. I don't know who his representatives are. I don't know I don't know how he's looking at himself in the future. I don't think there are teams that see him that way. I really don't. I mean, I think it was a pretty rude awakening for us. I know this has already been a couple seasons from now, in terms of the Damian Lillard trade. I remember talking to a lot of people around the league, and we had a lot of them on the show here, and just the idea of Niko Jovic, that was a centerpiece of a trade, or that was like, you're going to get a hell of a player in Niko Jovic, and they were like, Niko Jovic, why would we care about Niko Jovic? And 2 years later, has he done enough to change that view around the league? Because I don't think he has. Again,
No.
he's a very tall, ball skilled, shooting, big that can do a lot on the floor, and he's improved defensively. So there's definite improvement, but I don't know that he's done enough to be like, okay, yeah, I really feel comfortable paying him $10 million a year. I would say that most people around the league probably don't even know who Niko Jovic is. And so I think that's an unfortunate referendum on his career and how little he's been able to show consistently for Miami. So,
At the
I mean,
same
I
time, you've
would
got
say,
Keith Smith writing that. I mean, Keith Smith's plugged in. He's
yeah,
run.
no doubt.
He's obviously plugged in. Yeah, but I don't think any other NBA front office right now. Like, fortunately for Nico, he's not a restricted free agent now. He'd be a restricted free agent in a year. If he were a restricted free
Right.
agent now, he would have no leverage for $10
No
million
interest.
a year. But
Yeah,
because he could be a restricted free agent in a year, if you're Miami, you would be saying, probably not worth $10 million based on what he's been able to put together. But if we get ahead of it, and we
yeah,
also are betting on Nico, just like Nico would be betting on Nico, we think the world of this guy. If we can get ahead of it, this could end up looking like a pretty big bargain in a couple of seasons. And
that's fair.
that would be sort of the idea. But let's talk about Davion Mitchell's projection here. I think a lot of Heat fans are going to be interested in this. But before we do that, today's one more thing is brought to you by Open Phone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time that you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a service provider. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or your computer. Open Phone lets you manage business calls and texts from a single app. The shared inbox feature is a game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat, and their AI agent handles after-hour calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss a customer. Open Phone is offering listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonnba. That's openphone.com/lockedonnba. If you have an existing number with another service, Openphone will port them over at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. Keith Smith also writes that the Heat that he expects the Heat to re-sign Davion Mitchell this summer. So that's great. Keith Smith's plugged in. I think he's right. I think the Heat want Davion Mitchell back. I think Davion Mitchell wants to be back in Miami. The interesting part is this. Here's what he writes. A deal in the range of $12 million average annual value makes sense for Mitchell. He won't be a real target for the MLE teams, nor are the Nets likely to tie up their cap space in an offer sheet. He mentions the Nets only because they're the only team with real cap space. That should allow the Heat to re-sign Mitchell on a relatively team-friendly contract. $12 million a year for Davion Mitchell, regardless of how many years. That's a steal for the Miami Heat. And at the same time, I think Mitchell, if that's what he gets, probably made himself a lot of money during his short stint in Miami. I think it's a win-win.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, we had him on the show, still really one of our favorite episodes in terms of how he brought his unique perspective to joining this team, to his continued development on defense. I think he had a great few games here, for a great few months here, and I think he became a fan favorite very quickly. I mean, that was one thing that I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad that we pointed out when the trade happened, is that as nice a piece as Andrew Wiggins could have been, and you never know what you're getting with slow-mo, etc. Davion Mitchell was going to endear himself to fans very quickly, and that has certainly been the case. He's got that skill set and the tenacity defensively that is a natural fit for a fan base to be so like, oh, I love that guy. He's got that dog in him, etc. So I think that was it certainly looks like a great deal for Miami and for Mitchell both. I agree with Keith's assessment that not a lot of teams are going to be trying to go after him. I think it's a good deal. I really do. I just think you don't know. Again, you don't know what the rest of the roster will look like, and it could change very dramatically. But to have a guy like him, given the fact that he shot so well and that you believe in that shooting splits, that you think that that's
Mm-hmm.
still going to be more the norm than the aberration, and the tenacity of which he brings defensively, yeah, you need a high level role player like that. and I think he's a good fit for the Heat.
Yep. And to your point, regardless of what happens this offseason, Davion Mitchell is one of those guys that just fits in, regardless of what it is. You got Kevin Durant, great. Davion Mitchell makes sense for that team. You got Giannis, Davion Mitchell makes sense for that team. You don't got any of those guys, Davion Mitchell makes sense for that team.
Yep.
At $12 million a year, you don't feel compelled to start him, right? It's not Terry Rozier wasting away at $27 million a year.
Yeah.
It's, hey, this guy can also be our lead guard off the, like our number one third guard. He could be the
Yep.
number one guard we bring off the bench. He could play with Tyler Hero, without Tyler Hero, with player A, with player Z. He's that kind of guy. And $12 million is also about the going rate for high level backup point guards. And that's what Davion Mitchell would be if he was in that role. But I'd also, like I said, if this is the roster and you got another shot creator somewhere in that starting lineup, I think Mitchell could definitely start next year too at $12 million
Yep.
a year. I think he'd feel pretty good about it. That was one more thing here on Locked On Heat. If you missed our full length episode breaking down a Tyler Hero extension at $50 million a year, you're going to want to make sure to check that out. That's up on your YouTube, on the YouTube channel and in your podcast feed. For now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen today.